is really, really important, and I think very often as horse owners we just expect our horses to behave really well for the vet, even though we've not actually done any preparation to get them used to some of the things that the vet might do to them, which many of them are potentially very frightening for horses. However, to have a confident horse, we have to start way before the particular issue that we want to work with or trying to prevent. By doing this, it's really easy to think about the 3 F's, so that's friends, forage and freedom. Those are the 3 really, really key things to make sure that you're providing for your horses to make sure that his welfare is as good as it can be. So horses are trickle feeders, which means that they will eat for about 16 to 18 hours a day. So it's really key for us to make sure that we're not leaving our horses without access to forage for any long periods of time, as this can lead to both physical and mental problems. In terms of providing them with friendship, it's important that they have access to other equine companions. And although some people use other species to keep them company, other species will never quite replace what another equine can provide in that companionship. So it is important to make sure that our horses and ponies have equine friends as well. So in a natural environment, horses will walk on average up to about 30 kilometres a day. This can also be done by taking them out in hand and by being ridden as well. So all of those types of activity are good enrichment for them and help them to carry out their natural equine needs as well. But ideally, they really need to have as much access to freedom in the field with access to their companions as well, so they can carry out those natural behaviours and play together as well. So by providing those 3 F's, the friends, the forage and the freedom, making sure we do lots of preparation in training for anything to do with when the vet comes, we can make those vet visits much less stressful, much more enjoyable for our horses. And most importantly, we keep our vets safe as well. And obviously they have a really busy and difficult job to do. They have to deal with lots of different horses all the time. So we have a responsibility as their owners and their carers to make sure that we make our horses as safe to handle for them as possible. It's not fair for us to expect a vet to be able to carry out routine procedures on our horses if they're displaying big behavioural responses such as rearing or trying to get away from the vet because they're frightened. So we can do lots to help our horses become more confident in that situation, so that when the vet does come, we've got a horse who will stand calmly and relaxed whilst the vet fully examines them and possibly even takes blood or gives them their injections. Those things are really important for us to be able to train into our daily routine. All our handlers here at the Mare and Foal Sanctuary wear hats when they're handling the horses as a safety measure to keep themselves safe, and it's always recommended to wear gloves when you're handling the horses as well, just in case they do try to pull away and the rope causes any injury to your hands. But with enough training, enough behaviour training for your horse, you shouldn't be seeing any of those big behavioural responses, and your horse should be able to stand nice and relaxed for the vet.
We are quite regularly presented with horses that don't enjoy being injected, and that can vary from horses that are very violent in their reaction to horses that are just a little objectionable and bargy and try and getting away from the situation. It's quite a challenge for us when we are presented with horses that are needle shy from a safety point of view for the vet, for the person handling the horse, and very much for the horse themselves. There are ways and means that you can help prep for the vet's visit. And these are quite important, because if the pony is subjected to a new situation that is only happening for the first time when the vet arrives, actually that's quite a challenge, and again poses a safety issue for the vet, the handler and the horse themselves.
It's really important for the welfare of our horses and ponies that the vets are able to carry out the jobs that they come to do, whether that be routine or in an emergency situation. Obviously, if a vet comes out to give your horse a treatment and your horse is behaving so dangerously that they're unable to get close enough to do it, or the vet's not willing to put themselves in that situation, which would be perfectly understandable if your horse is displaying very dangerous behaviour, then obviously that horse's welfare is going to suffer. So it's really important that we get this groundwork in, make it part of their normal daily routine to get used to the different ways that a vet might handle them, so that we're able to really make sure that their welfare and their well-being is looked after. If your vet is visiting another horse on the yard, it's really beneficial to ask them if they would just pass by your horse's stable and just give them a little scratch if they like a scratch, or maybe just give them a carrot to feed to them. And that way that your horse builds up a more positive history with the vet, so that when the vet does actually come to examine them or give them any treatment, they're much more likely to start off more relaxed than they would do if they've never had any contact with the vet beforehand, or particularly if they've ever had a previous bad experience with a vet. It will help them to begin to learn that vets are not always a negative thing. One of the things that people often forget to include in their training programs when they're working to get their horse used to veterinary procedures and confident about everything to do with the vet is the fact that vets are often accompanied by different types of smells that the horse may not associate with other situations. So for example, the smell of surgical gloves, the smell of antibacterial washes and surgical spirit are all things that the horse will very often associate just with the vet. Horses have a really strong sense of smell, so these are things that the horse may be picking up on before the vet has even reached the stable. It's really important that we add these things into our training programs, and one way that we can do that is just to start pairing the smells of these kind of things with something really nice. So for example, you can start pairing them with your horse's food at feeding time. So to do that, all you would have to do is mix up a little bit of antibacterial wash in a bucket so that it's diluted and not too strong smelling. And just before you give your horse his feed every day, just place the bucket nearby, not too close because that may be too aversive for him, but just nearby to the stable, and then follow that by giving him his feed. And by repeating that over multiple times, your horse will gradually learn to associate that smell with something pleasant happening, so it will begin to change his emotional response.
So one thing that you can do with your horses to prepare them for injections is to just take 5 minutes during your daily grooming routine, just to make sure they're really comfortable with being touched all around their neck, like all down their vein, raising the vein like a vet would do if he was going to do intravenous injections. The vein that the vets use to inject into if they were going to have any sort of sedation or any sort of intravenous drugs runs down this groove in their neck here. So you just want to get your horse really comfortable with you running your hand down inside that groove, and then you can poke around and you can see where the pressure builds up in the vein. And it's really important to get them really comfortable with doing this, because a lot of the time, the only time this ever happens is when the vet is actually there. It can create quite a negative reaction when the vet starts doing it because they almost know what's coming. Whereas if you can incorporate it into your daily grooming routine, then it isn't any different from normal. Another thing that you can do, especially for preparing for vaccinations, is to just very lightly pinch their skin. And then you can build up the pressure more and more as they get more comfortable with it. So it may be beneficial for your horse to have a hay net or some sort of treats whilst you're doing this as well, because it will build that positive association between what you're doing and them being nice and calm and relaxed. Also, when it does actually come to giving the injection, the more relaxed the horse is and the more relaxed their muscles are, the less it will hurt and the less of a negative reaction you may get from it. So another common health issue that may come up with your horse, particularly in the summer months, is that they may develop some eye issues. It's really important that you can incorporate this into your daily grooming routine too, because it's another thing that we hardly ever do unless there is actually an emergency situation in which we have to give eye drops or something similar. You can start off by just making sure that your horse is happy with their face being touched. And if they remain nice and calm and relaxed, just give them a little scratch. This will help build up their positive association with what you're doing. You can then work your way gradually towards the eyes, rubbing all around the eye, and then opening the eye with your fingers as well as if you were going to put some eye drops in. And making sure you're rewarding your horse for scratches if they stand nice and calm and relaxed. If you happen to have an empty eye drop tube as well, this can be really handy to incorporate that into the training too, so that they get used to seeing it and it isn't something completely different if they ever actually need some treatment.
So one of the things that vets will almost always have to do with your horse when they come to have a look at them is listen to their heart rate. So this is another area that it's really important to get your horse used to, because it's the sort of area that, other than being when they're being tacked up, they're often not handled around the area where their heart rate is listened to. And also even just the use of a stethoscope, which is something they wouldn't normally see, can sometimes cause horses to become a little bit worried and a little bit frightened. Now obviously not everyone has access to a proper veterinary stethoscope, but it is really easy to get some toy stethoscopes or just really cheap ones that you can buy online. So it's really worth investing in that. And actually if you can invest in a stethoscope that works, it's a really good habit to get into listening to your horse's heart rate anyway. So when you introduce the stethoscope to the horse, just let them have a look at it if they want to. It may smell a little bit different to something that they're used to, and it just lets them know that you're going to do something. The other thing that's really worth doing is just warming the end of the stethoscope in your hands so that it's not really cold, because if it's really cold and you put it against them, it can cause a bit of a jump and a little bit of a shock. So you can just warm that up in your hand, and then initially just start to introduce it on their body. I'm just kind of covering that in my fingers and giving her a scratch at the same time so they get used to this line between you and them. Just give a little bit of a scratch and feel on different parts of her body. Gradually work your way towards the girth area where it would be used. And I would initially start to just place that against their body without even putting it in your ears, just to get used to that feel in that area. And you will find that when vets use the stethoscope, they have to push it quite far in just behind the elbow there. So it's worth getting them used to just a little bit of pressure going up into that elbow area just underneath there. And then if she's okay with that, then you can actually place it in your ears and get her used to you using it in that way as well. So the other really important thing to do when you're doing your vet training is make sure that you also add into your training plan having a second person there. Often what people do, and without realising, is do all the training themselves, and they get their horse really confident about having all the areas touched that a vet might touch. The horse gets really confident about having a vein raised, and then the actual vet comes and it all goes to pot, and the horse is very nervous and anxious when the vet is there. And often that's because it hasn't had a second person added into the training plan. So just try and get one of your friends or a friend on the yard to just come and help you, and have either yourself or them hold the horse for you whilst the other one of you pretends to be the vet and does all the things that you've been doing to practice for the vet. So raising of the vein, you might want to practice pinching the skin on the neck for an IM injection, and again just all the steps that you've done on your own. So with the stethoscope, just add those in with a second person holding the horse at the same time. And again, the more repetitions you can do with that, the better, and the more confident your horse will become. And also, if you can use different people, then try and get as many different people to come and be your second person and pretend to be a vet for you. And as well, try and think about whether your vet, it might be that your vet's a male, for example, and you know, most of your friends on the yard may be female. So if that's the case, see if you can enlist the help of a male friend. So again, they get used to not just one sex handling them all the time, but they get used to both. We often have really high expectations of our horses and expect them just to stand still for things like veterinary procedures or farriery procedures without giving them the option of anything to do. So always try and set your environment up to create success for your horse. So if it's okay to have a hay net or some food whilst your vet does what they're doing, then do set that up so that they've got that option of eating, which also helps to keep them relaxed at the same time. Obviously, if your horse is being sedated, then you can't provide food, but just check with your vet before they come whether it'll be okay for them to have access to a hay net whilst they're there. And also just making sure that you've prepared your horse for the area that they're going to see the vet. So the horse should be used to the area where the vet's going to have a look at them, and ideally that area should be used for building up a positive association before any vet visit. So taking your horse into that particular area and giving them a feed, for example, several times, so that they're not already stressed when they go into that particular setting where the vet's going to look at them. So another thing we all commonly have to do with our horses is give them wormers. And again, it's something that often people don't do any training for and just expect their horses to be completely fine with it when it comes to it. Or sometimes people just do what they have to do to get the job done at the time, and that doesn't really take into account what's going to happen the next time that you want to worm your horse. And if they've had a negative experience with it the previous time, then the next time you come to do it, they're likely to respond negatively before you even get to the worming stage, so as soon as they see or smell the wormer. So it's our job to make sure that when they see things like wormers, that they have a positive response to it and they're not worried by it. So one way that you can do this is use old or empty worming tubes that have been well washed out so they don't smell like wormer anymore. And you can allow your horses to just sort of start to investigate them orally and play around with them a little bit. And a way to encourage this, especially if your horse has perhaps had a negative experience in the past, is just to put something really tasty on there. So we've got some apple sauce on here, and some of our foals here are keen to get involved in some training. A really good way to do this is by using protective contact. So that's just you being on the opposite side of a safe barrier. And what that means is that your horse can be loose whilst you do the training, and they've got the option to move away if they want to. So if they do become worried or frightened, then they can just leave, and we're not forcing anything upon them. So you just hold it out to him and allow him to lick off that applesauce that's on there. And you can use other things. It's really important to make sure whatever you use on your empty wormer is something that your horse likes, so test it out on a bucket first. Some horses might like apple sauce or just mashed up apple. Other horses might like golden syrup. Also, you can put little pieces of apple onto the end to encourage them to actually put their mouth around it. And by doing that multiple times, then you should find that your horse is much more confident about the sight of a wormer, and they get used to the wormer feeling going into their mouths.
If you can use the tricks of getting the pony used to the idea of the vet coming in and raising the vein and just general handling, creating a scenario where they are familiar with the process that's about to happen, then the whole thing is a lot safer for everyone involved, and it's a lot less stressful for the horse involved as well. And you will find that horses are much more amenable to these things if they are used to the process, if they are used to what's happening. So please do use the tips and ideas that have been presented, because from a safety point of view, it's absolutely paramount.
So by providing all these training techniques and making sure we do them on a regular basis, we can really help our horses to become much more confident in veterinary situations. Here at the Mare and Foal Sanctuary, our friendly team are always on hand and willing to help you if you've got any questions or need any advice, and we can be contacted by phone, through the website, or on any of our social media channels.